Hello, my name's Tim. Welcome to Tim Burbage Reads, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my reading goals for last year and what my reading goals are for this year. So in 2025, I set myself some reading goals that I split up the year into thirds. Most people do it in quarters, but I did it in thirds because it just kind of was a bit more of a natural fit. So January to April, then you kind of have Easter in that. That's a nice tent pole to split your year up. Then you have May to August, kind of summer holidays with the kids, and then September to December with Christmas. And I think that worked really well, rather than going into quarters and then you I felt like I had a bit more time. Well, because I did. I had an extra month, but I thought it worked really well. So the goals I set was I wanted to read a Jack London book every year, and I achieved that. Tick. I wanted to read a classic book every part of the year, and I achieved that. Tick. I wanted to read a fantasy book every section of the year, and I did that. I wanted to read a book from the library every part of the year, and I achieved that. I didn't finish all the books from the library because I got kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, which was my only DNF of the year. But I'm still counting it because I went to the library and I got a book. I wanted to read a self-published book every third of the year, and I achieved that. I even did like a little mini self-pub September. I wanted to read a Michael Crichton book in every third of the year, and I achieved that. I wanted to read a non-fiction book every third of the year, and I didn't quite achieve that. I did one in the first third of the year, one in the middle part of the year, and then the final part of the year, I started a non-fiction book, but didn't really get very far. I read like 30 pages and then put it down. And I didn't have any drive to read non-fiction. The only reason I was reading non-fiction was because of that goal. And so I wasn't reading it because I wanted to read the book. You know what I mean? I was reading it because I felt like I had a target to hit. And then the final thing, my final goal was reading a book by Rick Riordan every third of the year. And I thought I would achieve this by reading the Trials of Apollo series. Second book, I got really, really stuck. I just didn't really enjoy it. But luckily, my kids have got Percy Jackson Mad. Or they already were Percy Jackson Mad. So I read Lightning Thief and Sea of Monsters to them. So that kind of ticked that box. I also wanted to track how many books I read in each third of the year and how many books written by women. So in the first third of the year, I read 32 books. And in the second and third parts of the year, I read 23 books in each of those. I only really started trying to prioritize women readers, I think, after the first month or so, when I realized I didn't have any female authors in my list, what I'd read. So in the first third of the year, I read 10 books written by women. And the second third of the year, I read 10 books written by women. And in the third part of the year, I read 6 and almost 7 because I was listening to Pride and Prejudice, and I finished that just at the start of January. So basically 7. So that is around a third-ish, which I think is okay. I'd like to read more, but I'm more interested in reading the books that I want to read. Again, I'm not reading books purely because they're written by women, but if it's a 50-50, if like, oh, should I read this one or this one, I'm going to pick the one written by a woman most of the time, or try to. So those were my big reading goals for the year, and I did very well on those. I think the only one I failed on was the non-fiction one. Yeah. Then we got to I did a Disney reading challenge where I picked every month of the year. I picked a different book to fit that challenge, to fit the film. This is by Shelf Reflections, and I went through the decades, and I went through the my favourites, kind of our family's favourite films, and picked a film, picked a reading challenge, and then picked a book to read it. And I was doing very well of having a video where I chose that book and a video where I did a book review for it. And then towards the end of the year, it all kind of tailed off a bit. So in January was the 1930s, so I picked Snow White, and where the challenge was where the main characters, or where a character's name is a colour, and I chose A Tale of Magic by Chris Colfer. In February, it was Fantasia, and the challenge was read a graphic novel, so I read Captain America Ghost Army. For March, the challenge was Cinderella, and the film was Cinderella I chose, and the challenge was Evil Stepmother, so I read Jane Eyre. And then in April, I put in my own one, because I didn't really like the selection they had in the 60s, and they didn't have The Jungle Book, which is one of my absolute favourite films, and so I've made some reading challenges for it, and one of them was like a book set in a jungle, so I read Congo by Michael Crichton. In May, it was the 1970s, and I picked Robin Hood, which again is one of my absolute faves, and the challenge was pick a book with an arrow on the cover, so I read Princess of Thieves, which was a Disney twisted tale about Robin Hood, and I absolutely loved it. Then in June, we were in the 80s, and I picked Oliver and Company. This was another one where there wasn't, Oliver and Company wasn't in the original list, so I made up my own challenges, and one of them was a book written by Charles Dickens, and I read A Tale of Two Cities. In July, it was Pocahontas, and one of the challenges was an author named John. And I chose a book by Jack London, because his birth name was John, and I read The Valley of the Moon. For August, it was the 2000s, and I picked Princess and the Frog, and it was a book set in the Jim Crow era, and I read Golden Age of Magic by Luann G. Smith. For September, it was the 2010s. I picked Big Hero 6, and it was a book with a number in the title, and I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. In October, it was the 2020s. I picked Encanto, and it was a book translated from Spanish, and I read 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That was a bit of a struggle. I didn't do a review for that in the end, because that was when everything started falling apart on the channel. But ultimately, I think I gave it 3 stars, where some parts of it I really enjoyed, other parts of it I really didn't enjoy. I didn't really enjoy how the story was told. It was just kind of a stream of consciousness. I found it very hard to place who anyone was or when anything was happening, but I really enjoyed the macro elements, I would say, and the themes. I loved how it brought in banana republics and the kind of tracking the history of the town more than the magical realism or what was happening to the characters. And there were some things as well where just the characters were doing things that I really didn't enjoy reading about. Yeah, so that was my review. Very quickly. And then November, we were going back to do like favourites of the family. So I went to Beauty and the Beast, where the trope was enemies to lovers, and I picked Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I did that one on audio. And I finished it in January. So it kind of shows how my reading was going towards the end of the year. I started in November, finished it in January. I think I ended up finishing 100 Years of Solitude in November, maybe, potentially as well. I can't quite remember. And again, it was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed the prose. I thought it was really funny, very biting at the society of the time, but there wasn't really much plot. I would listen to it and I go, wow, I really enjoyed that, but I felt no urge to turn the page, to keep going, to find out what happened. So I gave it 4 stars, and I could see why it's people's favourite, and I could see why people really enjoyed it, but for me, it just didn't quite hook me, but I think that was more from me and where I was. And then for December, I was planning to do The Little Mermaid, and my challenge in my mind was I was going to read the books that were our favourite films. So I was going to read The Little Mermaid, which is my wife's favourite film. I was going to get the comic for Big Hero 6, which is one of my son's favourite films, and read that. I was going to read Beauty and the Beast, and I was going to read The Jungle Book. I was going to do that in December. But then everything just kind of fell apart. So I didn't do anything in December. So you could say I technically failed the challenge. But doing 11 out of 12, I think, is pretty good. So overall, I'm really happy with my reading. I'm really happy with what I read and what I achieved. I read a lot of books, and even towards the end of the year, things weren't going great with my reading. I still enjoyed it. So what am I going to do for 2026? So one thing is looking at I'm still going to stick with the breaking up the year into 3s. I thought that was a good break. That was a good. I enjoyed that, but I'm not going to go into genres so much because I was looking at the fantasy one and I was like, does that count as a fantasy? Does a retelling of Disney's Robin Hood, where they're all animals, does that count as fantasy? I read 3/5 of The Once and Future King by T.H. White. Does that count as fantasy or does that count as a classic? Oh, I don't know. I found that quite difficult to gauge. Do you double count both books? Do you count one for another? And so what I decided to do was think slightly differently. Some of the challenges are very similar, but just think about it a bit differently. So the first challenge is I want to read 2 Jack London books every third of the year, because I'm really, really close to finishing all of his novels, and I want to do that this year. Next is I want to read a Rick Riordan book every third of the year. I'm currently reading Titan's Curse to the kids, but I also want to finish the Trials of Apollo series if I can. If not, I've got Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson series there to help catch me up, but I want to keep going with that. Then I want to read books that were gifted to me. I've still got a fair few books that were gifted to me that I haven't read, and they were all very, very nice books and really well picked. So I want to read 2 gifted books per third of the year. That will be topped up by my birthday in the middle of the year. I want to read a book from the library every third of the year. I want to keep using the library. Now that I've got like a little kids book club going with my kids and they get a lot of books from the library, that will be easier for me to do, but I still want to read from the library. Then I want to read books that I've borrowed from people. I've still got a fair few that have been lent to me and I need to read them so I can give them back. And I want to read 2 borrowed books every third of the year. And then I want to keep tracking reading books written by women authors in that as well. And then for my monthly challenge, I want to, be another video where I talk about, I'm in the middle of lots of series. I've started lots of series. I've not finished very many. So I want to read 1 sequel every month, be it book 2, book 3. Currently, I've started The Rosefield, which is book 3, but also book 6. And I want to end up with making progress on a lot of series. I'm planning on doing a video looking at my series and where I am and what I'm continuing with, what I'm stopping with, what I'm kind of putting brakes on. But that'll be a separate video. But those are my reading goals for 2026. So let me know in the comments below what your reading goals are, and please give this video a like. Please subscribe if you want to see more. You can add the little bell, then you'll get a notification every time I upload a video. I think my videos on here generally kind of tank the algorithm, so a lot of people who maybe subscribe even don't get shown them. So please ring that bell if you want to see more of my videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, get out of my house!